The SS Asia, built in 1873 at St. Catharines, Ontario. The Asia was a wooden passenger/cargo steamer. She was constructed out of oak and she had 2 decks aboard her. For propulsion, she had a fore and aft compound steam engine with 2 cylinders and 1 propeller. For her hull dimensions, she had a length of 136 feet, a beam of 23, and a depth of 11. She had a gross tonnage of 348 tons and a net tonnage of 267. Cargo such as livestock at times, along with lumber, camping supplies, and general merchandise, along with the passengers, is what she would spend her time transporting. The Asia would be launched on August 19, 1873. And not but 2 months later, on October 6th, on Lake Erie, she would actually strike the bottom near a lighthouse near Port Colborne, Ontario. The Asia would end up partially sinking. However, the damage aboard her was not severe, and actually a large amount of grain that she was carrying at the time was actually able to be salvaged and saved. She would then be taken to Sarnia to be repaired, and then 2 weeks later, she would be off on her normal routes. On September 4th of 1875, the Asia would collide with the schooner Levi Rawson on Lake Huron. Again on July 12th of 1881, she would come into another collision with another schooner, the Helena, in the St. Mary's River, and she would end up sinking from this collision. The Asia would then, on August 3rd of 1881, be raised and repaired in Sarnia. She would be chartered by the Great Northern Transportation Company to actually replace the steamer Manitoulin. This was in 1881. In total, the Asia had about 9 years of good service overall. In fact, she would spend the last 3 months of her service on a specific Georgian Bay route before a horrific accident on September 14th of 1882. On September 14th of 1882, at around midnight, the SS Asia would clear Owen Sound. She was under the command of Captain John Savage at the time. The Asia had a crew of about 25 crew members aboard her. She had also taken on cattle and livestock, along with over 100 passengers aboard her. It's safe to say the Asia was heavy, especially top-heavy. On the morning of September 15th of 1882, a horrendous gale would begin to overtake the Asia and everybody aboard her. This gale would come out of the west, and it would also stop her from making the port turn at Killarney. After a long battle throughout the night and into the morning hours, the SS Asia would founder stern first south of the Bustard Islands. Out of about 125 people aboard, only 2 people would survive this terrible disaster. One of the survivors was 18-year-old Christina Morrison. She was on her way to visit her sister in Grand Marais, Michigan, through Sault Ste. Marie. This is when she boarded the Asia in Owen Sound, late on September 13th of 1882. Oddly enough, Christina wasn't even supposed to be aboard the Asia, as she had actually missed an earlier ship, so thus she had to be on this one. Again, the Asia was extremely top-heavy and overloaded with cargo, much of which was livestock, not including the passengers as well. Almost 30 years later, Christina would go on to recount her terrible experience of surviving the Asia. She would go on to say how in the early morning hours, the ship was caught in a terrible storm. Christina would awake to hear a loud commotion, and this was around 8 o'clock that she said she heard it. She would go to ask the mate, a Mr. McDonald, who was actually her cousin, what all the noise was about. Mr. McDonald would say that they were throwing cattle and cargo overboard to reduce the heaviness of the Asia. As the storm continued to batter the Asia, especially into the morning hours, nearly everybody, 100 passengers and about 25 crew members, were all seasick. This storm would go on to produce hurricane-force winds, and the Asia was at the mercy of all of it. A newlywed couple apparently would urge Christina to put on a life preserver, and then they would also urge her to leap towards one of the lifeboats. This would happen as the Asia was becoming swamped with water all around her. She would jump into the water close enough to one of the lifeboats. Her cousin, Mr. McDonald, would then grab her into the lifeboat after he saw she had been struggling for some time in the water. The boat that Christina had managed to get into had 18 survivors within it. However, it would also be overturned, and 9 of them would be swept away. The only other survivor, a Mr. Tinkis, would work with Christina throughout the night to keep the lifeboat afloat. This would be especially so during the times that the lifeboat would overturn. Many people would go down with the Asia or be swept out to sea and die of exposure and disappear. Christina would also go on to say, one after another, the brave occupants of their lifeboat would succumb to the strain and exposure of the terrible storm of the wind and seas that night and early morning hours. Come dawn, only Christina and Duncan Tinkis would be the only 2 survivors on the morning of the 15th. They would reach a shore near Point Alberil. 5 of their other companions, including the captain, Captain John Savage, had actually perished as well because of the exposure, and he would lay dead in the bottom of the lifeboat. Christina and Duncan would spend the rest of the day on the lonely, cold shore. They were completely traumatized from the entire ordeal. Many questions would arise as to how this disaster even happened. Apparently, the Northwest Transportation Company who had chartered her had previously applied for a license to carry over 150 people aboard the Asia. However, the application was denied as to there was not enough lifeboats aboard the Asia. This would end up being the deadliest shipwreck disaster of the Georgian Bay and Lake Huron ever. Some 125 or so people would lose their lives. May all the crew members and passengers that were sadly lost on that night in the early morning hours aboard the Asia forever be remembered respectfully and peacefully, always. And that is the story of the SS Asia and her loss in the Georgian Bay of Lake Huron. Well, there is a lot more information about this ship and her tragic end. Please do check out the sources and more information from the survivor account from Christina. And there's just so much more to this story. I gave a good basic overview of everything, but if this really touched your heart and you want to know more, please do look into this story, as there's much more to be said about her loss on September 14th, 1882. The numbers of her loss, it's generally considered around 125, give or take or so. But yeah, I had not heard of this until doing more research, and this was staggering to learn of this. I don't know if this is true or not. I did come across one source saying that Captain John Savage ignored the weather signs, possibly, that were leading for that day when they had departed. I don't know if that's true or not. I'm not trying to villainize anybody. I'm just saying, that may have played a factor or not. I don't know. But yeah, just in more of my research, I learned these crew members and passengers battled this storm in mountainous waves throughout the night. They were thrown all about. And yeah, plain and simple, they were too heavy. They were way too top heavy, and which makes sense as to why they were throwing cargo overboard and the cattle and probably whatever else they could just to lighten her to make it through that. But unfortunately they didn't. And yeah, just incredible that I guess, yeah, there were still, I mean, what are the odds that Christina gets from a newlywed couple, gets the life preserver on, gets into the water, fights for a while, doesn't drown in that storm, makes her way to the lifeboat that has the captain, has her cousin in it, and several other people. I mean, my goodness, there is a God, because just as tragic as this is, there is light of this story that she would make it through this terrible ordeal, along with Duncan as well, that they would survive this, and years later she would go on to tell her story about this, and I'm sure Duncan would too. But yeah, let this story, it happened, let it sit with you, let it touch your soul, let it, it made me reflect a lot, and I'm thankful for all that I have and my life, and I'm very thankful to bring this story and the people and their lives to the surface about this event happening. And they deserve to be told in their stories as well. But don't just stop at my video. Please do your own research, do some more digging, and definitely investigate, as there's a lot of rich history into this. So, but yeah, what do you guys think? Let me know in the comment section down below. I always look forward to your extra information and comments, and just even people letting me know how I'm doing in there. It's all welcome, especially if they are kind words. And I just thank you, everybody, for enjoying this channel and enjoying these stories. Also, thank you for giving me some very nice comments to my recent ship drawings. That's kind of a new hobby that I'm picking up again and trying to, I wouldn't say perfect, but I'm definitely enjoying it, and I find it relaxing. And yeah, we'll see how many of those I put out. Maybe I can make prints of them if I think they're worthy of being made into prints. So we'll see about that. But either way, I thank you all in joining me today on this episode. As always, God bless you. And please do look forward again to the next episode on Songs of the Great Lakes.